Hi everyone, my name is Duncan and I am a librarian with Peace Library System. In today's session, we are going to be going over Ancestry, or more specifically, Ancestry Library Edition, which differs from the regular Ancestry if you were to create your own individual account. We're going to start with going over genealogy, describing what it is and how it differs from family history, and we'll do some overview on that. And then we'll dive into Ancestry and take a look at the resource itself. I'm going to do a land acknowledgement before we begin. Peace Library System acknowledges that we are located on the Treaty 8 territory of the Cree, Beaver, and Dene people, and Region 6 of the Métis Nation of Alberta. We are grateful to live, work, and learn together on this land, which has been home to many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples since time immemorial. We recognize this land as an act of reconciliation, and we also commit to supporting and celebrating our local Indigenous communities while working to break down institutional barriers to make our libraries equitable and accessible. All right, this is our intro to genealogy section. So genealogy is the study of ancestry and descent, and it refers more to the search for ancestors and descendants, with it being a single direct line that moves backwards from yourself. So that is starting with you, and you have 2 parents, you have 4 grandparents, 8 great-grandparents, and so on and so forth. Family history is genealogy come alive. So family history takes genealogy to a different level and looks not just at names, dates, and places, but it seeks to place your ancestors' lives in context, to seek out family stories, legends, and myths. So family history looks at the entire family unit in each generation and looks at things like when, where, and how they lived, how they worked, played, traveled, the triumphs and tragedies that occurred. And then it places all these within the context of the social, economic, historical world in which your ancestors lived. So quick recap, genealogy is more about data and evidence, whereas family history is the stories that we tell about the people we come from. So it's important to consider this question before we begin our family history research journey, is what I'll refer to it as. What do we want to learn about our own genealogy and family history? And what do we hope to find? What are we looking for, right? It's important to maybe not have a specific goal, but have some kind of goal in mind as we're doing research, something we can work towards. So this is where we're going to begin. We want to start with ourselves. We want to start with documents that we already have access to, any living relatives that we can ask about our family history, and then we're going to work backwards from there. So we're going to work from what we do know and compile that information, and then slowly but surely get to the unknown, the what do we hope to find part of our research. It's important to begin with exact full names, dates, and life events. Now, this can change or there can be misspellings, and we'll get more into that later. But if you do have exact names that you're already working with, maybe you're looking for information about your great-great-great-great-grandfather, but you only have limited information about his sister or his siblings, knowing those names can really help to get you started on your journey. So exact names, dates, and life events. And then lastly, primary sources. So these are official documents, things like land deeds, marriage certificates, etc. If you have any of those, that is another great place to begin your journey. Now, before we search, like I said earlier, we want to compile everything. We want to gather everything we have in one place. We might want to ask older family members to help fill in some of the blanks. The best advice when you start compiling everything you have is to begin immediately, right? You want to find out as much as you possibly can from the oldest generations in your family before those facts and those stories are lost, right? And before it's too late. However, even if you do not have older family members to draw upon, ask siblings, ask cousins. People pick up different pieces of information and remember things differently. So even if they're your age or younger than you, ask them about it. because you want to gather as much information and knowledge as you can from everyone, right? Every piece of information counts. And also look around, right? What are we looking for? Like attics and drawers, scrapbooks, photo albums. You never know what you might find in your own home even. We might want to sketch out a little bit of a family tree. So this is going to help visualize what you're missing. Gathering the names of all the siblings in a generation can be really helpful, especially if any of them have interesting names that would make a search easier. And then we might want to consider these questions, things like, did they perform military service? And if they did, was it during a particular conflict? If they served in earlier world wars, when and where did they enlist? What unit did they serve in? What country did they serve in? Were they injured, or did they earn any medals from their service? Did they immigrate? And if they did immigrate, you'll want to compile information about where they originally lived and when they left their home country. Even things like the port they left from, the ship they took, when they arrived in Canada, what port they arrived at even. But also keep in mind that they may have been traveling under names that are spelled differently than would have been spelled later in Canada. So it's important to use a large variety of spellings, but we'll get a little bit more into that a bit later. When and where they were born. Okay, if you know the church that the family attended, you might want to consider looking for christening records as well as their birth registration. And then when and where did they marry? So what denomination were they a part of? What church? Maybe even someone who stood as witness. Maybe you have access to that information. So these are just different types of documents, kind of divided them into three key sections. So we have life events. These are things like vital statistics like births, marriages, and deaths. And these are held by the province. We have legal events, things like censuses, wills, taxes, land purchases, and deeds. And then mentions. So maybe they were written about in a newspaper, or they kept a diary or a journal. That can be another good source of information for your research. A couple things we want to watch out for. Record accuracy. Some records might be slightly incorrect and can lead you down a different path that strays away from your core of research. So definitely keep an eye out on that. Date changes. There might be dates that are slightly different, even years different from what you originally thought, but it's important to leave a lot of space on either end of a date. Records weren't always kept the best 100 years ago, even 50, 60, 70 years ago. So it's important to leave a lot of leeway for date changing. Name variations as well. There could be other spellings of first and last names, even missing or additional letters. And we'll get into how we can search different name variations in a little bit too. I put timeline confusion down as well. So that would be things like overlapping dates. And this might even be a good prompt to create a timeline, right? Draw out long line on a sheet of paper and map out the timeline of your family history. Because if you're getting dates that are conflicting with each other, that might be an area for you to do some further exploration. And then the last thing I said is tunnel vision. So I think it's really important to get another set of eyes on your research, collaborate with someone else, a family member who's also interested in your family history. We don't want to put the blinders on and get sucked into our own research that we're missing glaring mistakes or glaring inaccuracies. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about Ancestry, and then we'll talk about the Ancestry Library Edition and kind of how they differ, and then we'll dive into the resource. So Ancestry is really the biggest and the most complete source of family history information online. If there are records or documents available that would help someone uncover their family history, most likely Ancestry has them. You have access to Canadian and international historical records through Ancestry. Important to note that it is an American company, but their records do span the entirety of the globe. And for Canadians, there are a few different levels of access in Ancestry, and I'll show you that on the next slide in their subscription prices. If you were an American subscribing and you wanted your own individual account, you would go to ancestry.com, whereas Canadians go to ancestry.ca, and they kind of target their content and what is available depending on which site or location you are subscribing from. Ancestry also gives you the ability to connect with other family history researchers. So they have these extensive discussion boards where researchers can connect with each other who are doing research on similar topics or people or families. And this can be really useful if you find a dead end or you just can't find anything on someone you're looking for. Rather than a bunch of people duplicating the research over and over, you can share what you've discovered and help one another out, make connections that would otherwise not be made. And then they also have tools for building family trees and sharing documents. So in the library edition, we don't have the family tree tool. If you do have an individual edition, you do have access to this family tree tool that gives you the option to upload photos and documents and create this really extensive family tree. All right, so if you want to do your individual account, and this is outside of the library edition, this is what the current pricing is through ancestry.ca. So you can do it monthly or in 6-month increments, and there are 3 different levels of access. So if you're looking for just Canadian records, there is that option, which is really nice and useful, right? You can get all Canadian and key global records, which is the most popular, it says. Or you can get everything on Ancestry for $30 per month. Now, I like how there's monthly options because I'm someone, if I'm going to do something or take on a project, I'd like to kind of allot a time for myself. So if I know maybe in April that I want to do some family history research and I'm going to have some free time to do that, I'm going to choose the monthly option instead of doing the 6-month option, because chances are I'm not going to be constantly going on Ancestry for a 6-month time period. But that is what the pricing is. Ancestry Library Edition is basically a membership that is licensed to the library, or in our case, library system, instead of you as an individual. So we do have a key difference document that is available on the PLS website under e-resources. It's attached to the Ancestry e-resource page. And this is going to be the same on all of our member public library websites as well. So that document lives on all of the websites. And it just goes over what is not included in the library edition. But essentially, it does provide you with the most important of the core services and collections. So all the records that are available to world membership holders are available to you. You can do all the same research that you would be able to do as someone who owned their own paid account. You're just using the library's account to do it. Another difference is the discussion forum. So you're able to read discussion posts from users. However, you cannot interact with them, meaning you can't respond or post your own. So that is one major difference. We talked about how there's no family tree designer. They do have chart and tools though, which are also available in the individual paid edition, but I'll show you that once we get into the actual resource itself. But in terms of the family tree designer, there are other websites that you can download, free ones that give you more options than what Ancestry would give you anyway. Or you can just draw one by hand, right? A lot of people prefer to do it just by hand and not have to print off or type in anything. They also have all the same help and learning resources as the individual account. So you're not missing out on any kind of assistance in that way. The biggest difference, though, is that the library edition can only be accessed from the library network or a computer in the library. So you are unable, or patrons rather, are unable to access Ancestry at home. Over the pandemic, Ancestry was kind enough to allow at-home access, and that really increased our usage statistics for Ancestry, but it is now reverted back to in-library use only. You don't need to log in with a library card or anything. You just click in and it automatically logs you in. So in summary, basically all the research sources and information are the same. You just don't get to use some of the tools that are available in the individual one, but most people don't use them anyway, so it's not really a huge loss. All right, I'm going to talk about how records are categorized in Ancestry. So these are the 4 types of records available. We have census records and voter lists, birth, marriage, and death records, also known as vital records, military records, and then immigration and travel. So the census records and voter lists, there are various regional censuses available. There's the federal census from 1871 to 1921, the Western Census from 1906 and 1916, and then there are voter lists from 1935 to 1980. So the section contains records from the censuses up to 1921 and voter lists up to 1980. And while many local or provincial censuses may have been taken prior to Confederation, the first comprehensive Canadian federal census was actually taken in 1871 and included the first provinces of Ontario, Quebec, New Brunswick, and Nova Scotia. And then as other provinces joined in, they were also included, so those being PEI, Manitoba, BC, Northwest Territories, and then what eventually became Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, and the current territories. And those were all included in the 1881 census. Now, censuses in Canada are generally released 92 years after they're taken. And so the most recent one is the 1921 census, which was released in the fall of 2013. And then voter lists are they're not formal censuses, but they provide the same basic information on all Canadians who are legal to vote in general elections in a given year. So that includes their name, address, and occupation. And we mentioned that you can find them between 1935 to 1980. Birth, marriage, and death records, again, also known as vital records or vital statistics, and they're kind of like the backbone of any genealogical research. Because they are held by the province and restricted to certain individuals, most of Alberta's vital records are not available on Ancestry. However, other provinces have provided indexes of individual records that are searchable on Ancestry. This just has not been done on Alberta yet. So I have some example ones from other provinces listed here that you can see. So a lot from Ontario. These are birth, baptism, and christening records. Newfoundland, lots from Newfoundland and New Brunswick as well. All right, military records. So Ancestry provides a number of collections for those who served in the Canadian military in numerous conflicts and at numerous points in history. Of these, the most frequently used is the Index of Canadian Soldiers of World War I, and that collection provides the attestation papers for each soldiers, and those were completed at the time of their enlistment. There are more detailed service records that are also only available through Library and Archives Canada, but these are some of the other categories of military records that they have. So draft, enlistment, and service. There are casualty records, prisoner rolls and lists, pension records, awards and decorations of honor, histories, I didn't say, and then disciplinary action records, which is kind of interesting. The last category is the immigration and travel. Okay, so there are ship passenger lists that range from 1965. No, that's wrong. 1986 to 1935. And those are border crossings as well. No, I'm wrong again. It should say 1865. Apologies for that. If your family did arrive in Canada prior to that, the chances of finding records of their journey are fairly slim, as Canada only began really formally keeping track of immigration in 1865 in the port of Quebec. And then they gradually started adding official documentation to other ports in the following decades. Public access at the moment only goes up to the year 1935. So if your family arrived after 1935, an official request has to be made by the person who came themselves or their next of kin to Citizenship and Immigration Canada. Now, depending on where your ancestors were coming from and where they were going, it's also possible that they landed in an American port, maybe something like New York, So also check American passenger lists and border crossings, and that might be something you want to try. All right, we're going to exit out of my little PowerPoint here, and we're going to go to Ancestry. So to access Ancestry, we're going to start on the PLS website here. You can also go to any member public library webpage. It's going to be in the same spot. But I'm going to go to e-resources in the top right corner here. And this brings up a big alphabetical list of all of our e-resources. And because Ancestry starts with an A, it's right at the top. Before we click in, I'll highlight our key differences document. So this is the document I was talking about earlier that tells you what is not included in Ancestry Library Edition. And then we also have these tip and trick videos that are hosted on Niche Academy. And these are just little 1-minute clips that go over some of the features in Ancestry. And you can use these to train staff or patrons. All right, let's click in. And we're brought right to our home page here. So there's lots of links. We have a navigation bar at the top and then a few different tools throughout. It can be a little bit overwhelming when you first get in. But we're going to jump right into searching for a document. And we can do that by clicking this Begin Searching button. So how searching works in Ancestry is you can search within a collection, or we can do a general search like we're doing now. But typically, it's going to give you parameters to search by. And then if there are more specific collections, they're going to be listed on the right-hand side here. So we can see some of those record categories we were talking about earlier are on the right-hand side that we could click into. But for this one, it's allowing us to search by name, location, or birth year, or even by collection, like we said. So I'm going to just type in the last name Smith and see what comes up. Good. So these are all the results for the last name Smith. There are 88 million results, so that's a lot. We can use filters on the side to narrow down our search results. So if we want to narrow it down by the type of record, where the location of the record is, or even the date. But once we've found what we are looking for, we can click on it. And this brings us, this isn't a very comprehensive record. This is just kind of a tiny one, it looks like. But what happens is they give you, if there is an image, it'll appear here. And then they detail all the information that has been transcribed from that image. So that'll be here. And then there is also a source button where you can get an instant citation and just some information about where this came from. Okay. You have a few options. You can send your document. You can actually send a copy of this to your email if you click send document, or you can print out a version for yourself. There's also a way to download a file directly to your computer, and I'll show you how we do that. So we can click on the image and it brings up a larger version of it. We can scroll in and out so we get a better look at what we're looking at. On the top right here, if I hit save, this gives me another way to send the image by email, but it also gives me the save to this computer option. So that's how I would download it as a file. On the right here as well, we have this little tool menu. And when I click on it, it gives me a few more options. So I'm able to rotate it right, left. I can flip it. I really like this invert colors option, because for some of the more complex documents you see on here, this can make it a little bit easier to read the text. And then there are some additional settings underneath that. So that's essentially what documents look like and how you can kind of play around with them, how it works on Ancestry. But I'm going to go back up to my navigation bar here and hit home, and this will bring me back to the home page. So that was just a general search we did. Beside that, there's this feature called Story Scout, which is this family history search. And this does not work for everyone. This seems to be like a very specific tool. But essentially what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to search for your grandparent. And I've tried mine and nothing came up. So I found a name where something did come up. But you would search for your grandparent. and click Find Your Stories. And then if enough information is available in Ancestry's records, it'll create this kind of PowerPoint presentation that highlights all that information. So if this person is my grandparent, I would select them. And if there is enough info, it'll create this little PowerPoint. So it looks like there's not very much here. There's only 3 slides, and it looks like we're only getting information about an obituary that was posted in a newspaper. But it's a neat tool, right? Something to try and play around with, because who knows, there might be tons of information about your grandparents or a family member. All right, back to the home page. Underneath that, there is a tool called the 1950 Census District Finder. And this is an American-focused tool, but it's still kind of neat to look at. So you can click into it, and it gives you all these options for American states. And I can keep clicking in further and further, and it'll give me census information. It's not a very good one. Let's find a better one. Closer up to Seattle and Tacoma here. So it gives you different census districts from 1950, and you can click on them, and it shows you how it was drawn out back then too, which is really neat. All right, underneath that, we have our 4 types of records: the census, vitals, military, and immigration records. And these are the records we went over in the PowerPoint. So this is where you can search specifically within those collections. You can see within the census collection, it gives you many more parameters to search with. If you scroll down to the bottom, they usually include all the collections that are included in this. I go back and we click on the vital records. Similar, it gives you a lot more parameters to use. And then the collections are not on the bottom, they're on the right-hand side this time, where you can narrow down more specifically by category, like birth records, and then maybe I'm looking for Canadian specific birth records, and then it'll give me some different collections to look through. But what I want to do is I want to show you wildcard replacement letters. So this is when we are searching for variations of last names. So my last name, Lotoski, ends in an I. Now I've seen previous documents that have relatives spell Lotoski with a Y. So how do I do a search that encompasses both I and Y, and maybe other variations where it's spelled with, I don't know, an E? It's a possibility. I'm going to use the question mark. Okay, and so what the question mark is going to do, it's going to search every letter variation for that one spot in the name. So it's going to search for Lotosk, and then it'll search every variation starting from A. So Lotoska, Lotoskb, Lotoskc, and so on and so forth. And then when I hit search, we'll see, so we have Lotoski with an I, we have some with a Y. I don't know that we're going to find any other variations, but it just shows you how it searches every possible combination. Now, if we want to do more than one letter, maybe LOTO and then SKI, we're unsure, we're going to use the asterisk. And so the asterisk is going to search up to 6 different letter combinations. So it's going to start with LOTOA, LOTOB, all the way through the alphabet, LOTOAV, LOTOAA, LOTOAC, LOTOAD. So it's going to go through every single combination of letters, up to 6 additional letters, and search for that name as well. I could also put the asterisk in the middle of my name if I'm searching LO asterisk SKI, and it'll search for every variation in between those two parts of the word. But let's try it like that, and we'll just see what comes up. I haven't tried it like this way. So we can see we have Loholoski, Lopinski, Lewiski, Lokoski, like all sorts of different variations of last name because we use the asterisk. So Just to recap, we have the question mark wildcard replacement and then the asterisk one. Question mark is for a single letter, asterisk is for up to 6 possible letters. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my home page, and we're going to work on the navigation bar at the top here. So when I hit search, this is another way to access the 4 categories of records we looked at. If we want to do a search that encompasses all of the categories, we can hit card catalog. And this will give you a view of every collection that Ancestry holds. And then from here, you can, again, filter by collection and start looking in more specifically. All right, besides search is message boards. So these are the discussion boards, rather, that I was talking about earlier. And they're divided into 2 types of categories. We have location categories and then topic categories. So it's really interesting. I can click into Canada, and then it further divides it into by province. So I'll click on Alberta. And then if someone who has an Ancestry account has done research on a city, town, hamlet that you are from, it'll be listed here. So I'm in Grand Prairie right now, so I'm going to click on the Grand Prairie one. And we can see there are 179 threads of people who have done research in the Grand Prairie area or about Grand Prairie families. So this is only showing 10 per a page. I'll go 100 per page so we can get a better idea. But this is great because if you're in Grand Prairie or if you're in a specific town or city looking for information on your family, you can come here and maybe someone has already done a large chunk of research. And then you can click into the thread and read all the replies. You just cannot interact with them, right? You can't reply yourself or initiate your own post. Beside the message boards is the Learning Center. And these have 2 features. One is the research aids, which are kind of like tip and trick sheets and articles that are going to help with your research. So things like Ancestry Ann's top 10 search tips. What's another one? Military records, tips for success. So it's just giving you, and these are made by Ancestry, so it works directly with the resource. So if you're looking for something specific, this might be a good way to go about doing that. And then the other tool is this maps tool. Again, this is American specific, and most of these redirect to the same place. So if I click on the state of Nebraska, it gives me all the districts. And then it has all this information on the side, like land records and vital records that are specific to this state. But it doesn't matter which one I click on because it redirects me to this Roots web, which is a wiki for genealogy research. But this might be another site aside from Ancestry that is interesting to take a poke around in. All right, beside that, we have our charts and forms. So these are free to download and can be edited directly on your computer. But these can be really great for organizing your research. They're all in PDF format, which allows you to edit them. So if I hit this one, this is an ancestral chart. It's a family tree information, but not a full family tree. I can go in here and I can actually click in and type my name and create my family tree and then save it as a file or print it off. So there are a few different options here: family group sheets, research calendars for organizing your research journey. They also have census form examples. So they have American, British, and Canadian ones. And these are really interesting, especially if you're working within a certain period of time and you want to, I don't know, recreate it. You can hit download and it gives you the census form. So you can fill this in and get, a really accurate snapshot of information. All right, and then the last thing on our navigation bar is this new collections tab. And so Ancestry continually adds new collections throughout the year. Any recently added collections are going to be located here. So this is always fun to come to and see kind of what's been recently added, just to do some free form exploring that has nothing to do with my own family history research. Okay, All right, we're going to go back to my slideshow. These are a few other websites that you might want to consider using that are not Ancestry. So things like Family Search, which is free to use, Genie.com, which you can get a basic account for free, but there is a subscription for the year for more access. FindMyPast.com, which has subscriptions that range from around $11 to $20. And then MyHeritage.com, where again, you have a basic plan is free, but if you want complete access to everything, it is $389 a year. So if you're not finding what you're looking for on Ancestry, you might want to explore some of these other sites and read about what kind of collections they offer, what kind of records they offer, and consider creating an account or purchasing one. Now, some tips and tricks before we end about your search. One, again, we mentioned be flexible with the dates. It's very common to see people's ages and the years of their major life events changing from document to document. For example, if someone in the family or neighborhood was answering a census taker's questions about the household, it's reasonable to assume that they might have not remembered precise dates for everyone's birthday. Right, the further away you get from a historical event, the greater there is for possibility of error or someone misremembering. So always give a comfortable range of time for any dates that you know about, and don't just dismiss a record that might be really useful just because the person's year of birth is a couple of years off. We talked about trying different spellings. Even a few generations ago, the spelling of names was not as standardized as it is today. So another tip would be saying the name out loud and try to work out all the different ways it might be spelled phonetically. Right? Vowel sounds are especially subject to alteration due to different accents, and what the record creator might have been used to. So vowels are more often than not are recorded in different ways, while things like consonants and hard sounds, those tend to be more stable. So just like with the dates, be flexible and don't get hung up on what the current spelling is or what it's supposed to be, right? It changes. And that's where we use those wildcard letter replacements. We want to double check our transcriptions against the scan of the original record. So I showed you how they have the transcription and then they have the photo of the record. Now, because there is so many records in Ancestry's database, a lot of the transcription work is outsourced internationally. So there can be a lot of errors when it comes to accurately describing what is on the record. And this is just because a lot of people working on transcribing the records do not speak English as a first language. And as well, because most of the time, historical handwriting is really difficult to read, even for native English speakers. So, take your time, check back and forth between the typed out version and what is on the actual record, because it can be very easy to miss out on valuable information because of poor transcriptions in the database. We talked about the Learning Center, so make use of those help resources, those articles, and those tips and trick guides, because they can be really useful for giving you another hint on how to search. Lateral thinking. So we talked about hitting a dead end when you're doing research and you just can't go any further, and it can be really frustrating, but what you'll find is that over time you can develop the ability to think laterally, meaning you move sideways and try to find a way past your issue. So if you can't find your great-great-grandfather, try his sister, that sort of idea. And the last tip is to talk to your family, right? They're the most important source of all. They're going to really be key to getting you started and finding what you're looking for on your family history research journey. But that is it for the session today. If you have any questions or you'd like to learn a little bit more, you can always contact me at dlotoski@peacelibrarysystem.ab.ca. But that is it. Thank you, everyone. And we hope to see you at the next one. Take care.